Exciting news, moms and dads. Thank you for all of your incredible feedback on the podcast. We knew we had to give you more of what you love, and that means answering as many of your questions as possible. That is why we are now releasing a second weekly episode dedicated entirely to Q&A. We know how much you care about your kids' health, and I'm here to bring you real talk, clinical insights and experiences, and practical tips to help your family reach new levels of healing and wellness. To submit your questions, simply email us at support@pxdocs.com with the subject Ask Dr. Tony, or drop them into our stories on socials each and every week. Tune in this Friday. We can't wait to dive in and answer your questions.
Our job as parents is not to look at those extremes, it's to make them as resilient as possible, to give them the best chance at health, to give their bodies the best chance to fight disease and to not have a chronic disease. And that's what we're trying to do. And you can do that. People can do that. They've been doing it forever, and people are doing it now, and they see the changes.
Welcome to the Experience Miracles podcast, where we help parents find hope, answers, and drug-free help to overcome your child's chronic health challenges. I'm your host, Dr. Tony Ebel, and I'll be sharing my experiences as both a dad and a doctor on every episode. I can take the latest science and neurology of healing and break it down in the most simple and relatable way possible. We'll take on the toughest topics and answer your biggest questions through interviews with other amazing parents and leading experts, leaving you with practical action steps that you can take to help your child heal and thrive. It's time to expect and experience miracles. Let's get started. All right, everybody. Today's special guest is someone that I have been following on Instagram for a long period of time. And you might be thinking, well, that's not much of an introduction. Don't worry. I'm going to go through the bullet points of Dr. Joel Gator's incredible, impressive, and impactful resume. But before we launched the PX Docs platform, which is our hope, empowerment, answers, help, it's full of articles and it's full of videos, and now it's the Experience Miracles podcast. Well, before God really called me and encouraged me and lovingly, sometimes I feel like shoved me in this direction to make all this content, before we really officially got loose with it, I am a lifelong learner. I'm a big nerd. I don't like to do anything if we don't learn how to do it well first. So for many months, actually probably well over a year, I really got on Instagram and I got on Facebook and I got on YouTube, and I searched for people who were not just experts in natural health and you could call it holistic or integrative or functional health, but I really wanted to find someone or someones who were focusing in that frame for kids' health. If you think about it right now, that's probably why you're hopefully falling in love with the Experience Miracles podcast and the content that we can share with you, because for every 10,000 natural health experts and influencers and educators and doctors for our health as adults, there's maybe one who's talking about natural, integrative, and holistic health for our kids. And that is a huge reason why, one of the many, that so many kids are so sick. Who do we turn to? Who do we trust when we know we want to get out of the conventional pediatrician system, get out of the drugs first, drugs for every symptom, every condition system? Well, where do we go and who do we trust? And so our guest today, who I'll be interviewing here in a couple of minutes, Dr. Joel Gator, this episode was awesome because he really is going to help guide parents, guide families into the right direction to get health restored, to build health for your family. Dr. Joel Gator is from the popular parenting Instagram, Dr. Joel Gator, and he's a board-certified pediatrician in Los Angeles, California, who specializes in parenting, wellness, and integrative medicine. He's the author of the book, Parenting at Your Child's Pace, the Integrative Pediatrician's Guide to the First 3 Years. And you're going to learn all about the book today, and you're going to learn all about the uniqueness, the specialty, the awesomeness, and the difference between an integrated pediatrician and a more conventional or standard. Dr. Joel grew up in Toronto, Canada, and completed his master's degree in epidemiology before earning his medical degree from Thomas Jefferson Medical College. He then completed his pediatric medicine training at Children's Hospital in Los Angeles, and worked in private practice in Beverly Hills before founding his current practice in Studio City. Dr. Gator has published research in peer-reviewed journals on topics such as childhood injuries, obesity, and physical activity, and he's been featured in numerous documentaries, films, summits, podcasts, and articles. I had a blast during my conversation with Dr. Joel today. We went through so many things that I know are going to transform and improve your family's life. Let's get into it. Welcome, Dr. Joel. All right, Dr. Joel. So kicking us off here, I was thinking about the conversation we are blessed to have. We're so excited to have you here today. We're so grateful. I love your content so much, as I said on the introduction with Instagram. I just, every time another one comes up, I just can't wait to see what's written on that whiteboard and what direction the conversation is going to go. It's both, there's some anticipation and then there's the empowerment and information too. So I love it all. And I was thinking about it. I thought, well, within chiropractic, specializing in pediatrics, we're a unique bird a little bit within our pool of chiropractors. Most chiropractors are focused on, I guess you could call it the conventional standard path of musculoskeletal, back and neck pain, which is wonderful. Obviously, chiropractic taking care of those things instead of opioids and surgeries is a wonderful thing. So just contrast here that I've always kind of felt a little bit in a way that I enjoy out of place in my own profession, and percentage wise, maybe I'm not in the majority right now. But then you as an integrative, just real functional, amazing pediatrician, your percentage point of, where you exist within your profession is, I'd imagine, even, smaller compared to the one within pediatrics and chiropractic. So I got to know, what started you down this integrative path that you now have, not only with your practice, but with your content and the book and the way you're serving families? What was the catalyst to this path?
So it's interesting for me because I feel like the conventional story for integrative medicine is somebody who has some sort of health issue and then they don't get better and then they go to an integrative practitioner and then they do and then they're like, oh, their mind's blown and they start doing that. That's not really my story. I don't really have a specific thing. I think for me it was a mixture of a couple of things. Number one, going through residency, going through training as a medical doctor, and then getting really frustrated with the system, giving medications for everything all the time. Seeing patients go to other practitioners like a chiropractor, like a naturopath, and get better after getting a diagnosis where they were told they were never going to get better, or maybe they were working within the medical system for a long time, seeing that with patients, seeing that with friends, family members, all those things. And then also meeting my wife, who's pretty naturally minded and holistic minded too. So all these things together open up my eyes to a new world. And really, once you start looking into it, you're like, like, why are we not learning this? So much of this is so obvious and really not controversial. Some things certainly are, but most things are not really controversial. There's nothing controversial about preventative care, wellness, about thinking about your foundations. It's just that we're not really taught about nutrition. We're not taught to think about these things. It's like, medicine is really good at teaching you how to think through a problem and, figure out what's really severe and then how to treat that really severe thing. But it's really not good at preventative care, at chronic disease. It's not what we were ever trained in, because that wasn't what the big issues were 100 years ago. So the medical model has never shifted. And that really, for me, pushed me towards starting to learn about this stuff. And I'm not against Western medicine. I say that all the time. I'm not against Western medicine. There's a time and a place and a lot of great things that we can do. We can save people's lives. You can take an antibiotic for your pneumonia and be better in 2 days instead of dying, which would have been the case, 20 years ago. You can get an MRI, an X-ray, all these things are great. But we're terrible at chronic disease. 50% of kids have a chronic disease. We're terrible at prevention. And like you mentioned, my Instagram's it's not that controversial. I mean, I just make questions, but sometimes it can get that way for whatever reason. But it's like just asking questions and everything gets so divisive. And that's even why I wanted to write the book, Parenting at Your Child's Pace, because it's like I wanted to de-stress parents, kind of bring people back to the middle, remind people that there are many ways to do things. There's not one way. It's good to know all the information. And with medicine and parenting, it's like we've moved to telling people what to do instead of informing them and giving them all the options. and then letting people make the decision that makes the most sense for them. And so all these things together is what led me to kind of integrative medicine and writing the book and the way that I talk about things.
That is absolutely stinking awesome. I love that because the truth is, I think parents would be surprised. I think all patients and all people would be surprised to know that actually our practitioner story is very similar in its kind of flow and its journey that usually a parent or a patient story is. We went through the conventional path, found some moment of frustration, like, and then found that magical aha moment ourselves. Like we've lived when patients, because this is by far the most common phrase on, the first or second time that folks are, exposed to our content or coming in for a consultation, right? In an exam. And we start to explain these things like you just said to them. And they always go, why didn't someone tell me this before? Or, why didn't they usually just say doctor. They won't necessarily put the descriptor of conventional doctor on like we kind of need to today. Why didn't my doctor tell me this before? And we have that, we go back in our time and we go, well, why didn't school tell us this? Why didn't somebody tell us before? So parents, you need to know that the best of us integrative and functional practitioners, we have not only the alignment of, values and the way we look at health and we look to build health naturally, we actually probably have a really aligned and similar story ourselves of how we got here as well. And what I really love about your content, what I really love you said there, and I want to pull on that thread, one of your recent posts that I commented on and loved is you said, medicine is outdated, or modern medicine is outdated. And so right there, you're talking about how, 100 years ago, its core tenets were developed to solve problems of 100 years ago, and it hasn't shifted. And shifted is that word for updated. And I think that really might confuse people because we think modern medicine with all of its bells and whistles and all of those fancy MRI machines and all of these wonderful things we have, which are totally wonderful for crisis intervention, like you said, the severe problems, and they are totally useless for health restoration, which is what we need to be focused on the majority of times, right? And so can you go a little deeper into some examples of where dealing with chronic disease, which now we'll get into the acronym, we'll get into seeds, and we'll get into what's causing chronic disease. But I guess let's kind of go forward to go backwards. To help a family or a child or a patient heal from chronic disease, we don't need advancements of medical technology. We actually need core basic elements, right? And so it's kind of like organic food where it may seem updated and new to families, but it's actually been around forever, right? And so just because modern medicine isn't updated doesn't mean that we can't as families. So I guess I told more of a story than framed a question there. But for you, what are some examples that you would share with families where modern medicine for what they need may actually be outdated and not the path they want to go to first?
Right. So I think setting the stage, that you did is really excellent. And I think again we have to go back to medicine, and what we were taught is here's the problem, here's the solution, here's the treatment. But if I'd like to take the solution of a tack on the butt, right? It's like you have butt pain and you go to the doctor and they're like, oh, here's some Tylenol for your pain, or here's some medicine for your pain. But if you don't get rid of the tack, then the medicine's not going to help. Yeah. And that's the way that we're practicing medicine these days. And it's like we've forgotten that all of the basics matter. And yes, we have more technology, and yes, we're getting better at a lot of the infectious disease type stuff. We people were dying a long time ago from a lot of things, and we don't have that problem, nearly as much anymore because we have better sanitation, we have better medications, we have better, more calories. People are not malnourished, those kinds of things. So there's still problems with those, but we're much better at it overall. But we are seeing chronic disease rates continue to increase for basically every kind of chronic disease, to the point now where 1 out of 2 kids have a chronic disease. Most adults, more than 50, like 60% or something on a study that I saw, are taking 5 or more medications. If you look at the autism rates, it was like 1 in 10,000, then it was 1 in 150, yep. Then it was 1 in 30s, and then in California now it's 1 in 22. ADHD rates are skyrocketing. Mental health disease is skyrocketing. Like 10% of kids have an anxiety disorder. 4 or 5% have depression. Obesity rates are like 20% in kids. Diabetes rates are skyrocketing. 1 in 3 kids have diabetes or pre-diabetes. Like these numbers are insane. It's like everyone. If you have 2 kids, one's going to have a chronic disease, and it keeps getting worse. So the simple thing here to think about is what we're doing isn't working. Modern medicine and advances are not the solution to this problem, right? That you can make sure that we aren't missing cancer, right? You can make sure that in a acute crisis like an asthma exacerbation that you can help somebody breathe. But the question is why? Why does that kid have asthma? Why is this kid getting autism? Why are kids getting diabetes and prediabetes? Why is one in 5 kids obese? Like what is going on? And then what can we do about it to change that? And the answers are not that
Yeah.
complicated. I mean, they are very complicated to change on a societal level. Obviously, it's not a simple thing. But the things that you can do as a family are pretty simple. It's really just the lifestyle things, and the vast majority of individuals that make these changes um, see a huge difference. And yes, genetics plays a role, absolutely, but it's not the main factor here. It's our lifestyle, it's the food, it's the toxins. And if we think about these things, we make changes, then we will go backwards. And we don't want to go backwards on medicine. We want to have all these great things, but we need to go backwards in terms of when these things were not occurring as frequently, and that's balance, right? It's not all forward progression. It's learning from what worked before, learning from what works now, and bring it to the middle.
I love that. It's, we will communicate a lot with not only with other chiropractors as we're kind of training on them, but this is actually a phrase I'll talk a lot about with families. It's kind of this hard, easy approach. The beginning of moving in this direction towards natural health and better health for your entire family may seem and is, if we stay in this frame of it, it is hard. It's hard because now, it is a lot less hard than it was even 10 to 15 years ago because there is a movement happening. Scroll anybody's Instagram and hopefully you're seeing this movement happening, but it's still hard. It's still hard to feel like you have to move against the grain. But that grain is just an established default system. And also, it's really not hard to go back through those stats that Dr. Joel just went through. And then you can take those stats and you can just go observe them in life. After this podcast, or maybe you're outside walking around listening to it right now, just look around. And this is disheartening what I'm about to say, but it is so reality. We can see evidence statistically, and then you can just go to a local school, to a local park, and you will just see sick, stressed kids. You will see they're more exhausted, they're less engaged, they have bags under their eyes, they have red patchy skin from all the autoimmune and the allergies. You can see the signs of chronic illness everywhere we look. So I love what you said. I love the simplicity of it because it's so right there. It's not working. And I always use a real similar analogy with I get to practice in Chicago land here, Dr. Joel. So okay, the Cubs pulled out a couple, but generally every sports team stinks, the politics stink, and the weather stinks. So it's you know what? The one that you can control, like when the Chicago Bears lose for another 3 seasons, when it's not working, they're going to get rid of their head coach. And by replacing their head coach, they're also probably going to install a new strategy, right? And that's the way it can work with healthcare as well. So it can feel hard, moms and dads, to be like, wait a minute, am I going to be doing something radically different if I don't use modern medicine for health and wellness? No, because actually the best of modern medicine isn't health and wellness. It isn't restoration and healing from chronic disease. It's emergency crisis. So use it for that and then use something else. And then it gets easy. And what I love is the way you teach. Your content really makes it easy. It makes it practical. You really have an incredible gift to be able to speak to topics that I think other people do. I would say this to you, buddy, man. I think they unnecessarily make it controversial. Maybe other people are doing that for a reason because that'll get clicks. And I know you're not. You're always making your content to be real life, to be practical. The book is real life and it's real practical. And so even this first acronym of SEEDS, and what I'd love to do, where I'd love to go deep with this is this. I think right now today, there's this massive shift happening where there is a lot more awareness around natural health, or I'll put it in this frame, what causes our kids to get sick. So therefore we got to do the opposite. Once we figure out the list of, okay, these things are all bad. Well, that's an important list, but the better list is what are all the good things I can do, right? What can I add to our family's life to do it? You know what? The one sucker, and it kicks off your acronym, And it is right in the face of every adult. We understand how much it negatively impacts our health of all kinds, our sleep, our digestion, our immune, our mood. But the word stress is the, 10,000 pound gorilla that is in the room for kids' health too. That's my specialty. The story of the perfect storm is that stress begins from preconception to pregnancy to labor and delivery to a colicky baby is, and it is okay to say it this simply, they're a stressed out baby. Their nervous system is stressed out. And so I love that you start with that. And I'd love for you to take us into how does stress play a role, not just in mom and dad's life, but what kind of role is stress of today's world playing in our kids' lives and their health?
Yeah, I think it's a major factor. I mean, it's one of the most important influences on our health because stress in and of itself is a good thing. It's a survival instinct. There's always the classic example like you have stress so you can run away from a lion, or stress because you can run away from a tiger. I don't know, who's running away from lions and tigers, but that's always the analogy that people make for it, right? And it's like that's good. You want to get away from it. You want to get away from the danger. But our lives have this low level of chronic stress at all times, whether it's from social media or the news or all of the things that are going on. And we, again, forget that we're a system and everything's connected, and our hormones and our immune system, all of these things function together. And when you have this low level of stress, then your body is releasing chemicals in a way that it's not really meant to do. So you're not digesting properly. Your blood flow is not optimal. You have cortisol and other hormones that are in levels where they're not really ever meant to be, because you're supposed to be, at least in human history, we're supposed to be out farming and making food for the family and all these things that people used to do. And then all of a sudden now we're TikToking and Instagramming and worried about what the influencer's doing and worried about what's going on in the other country that has nothing to do with your life. And yes, it's good to be informed, but we're stressed about a lot of things that we don't need to be. So people are just basically always stressed, and that's not good for you. I mean, this isn't, again, rocket science. Like, we had studies on this for a long time. Like, they used to stick viruses in people's noses. I don't know who's volunteering for these things, but they did. And you have a much higher rate, 2-3 times rate of getting sick if you have a virus in your nose, if you report being more stressed, if you report not getting enough sleep, all these things that we know are very basic to our health. But now we're just chronically stressed. So yeah, I think it's a huge issue. I think it's a huge issue with our kids. It's certainly an issue with ourselves. We can all do better at it. But the first step is just even acknowledging that it's part of the problem. And I don't know if you want me to get into like the whole thing, but we can if you want to.
Absolutely, because that's the deal. And I think too, speaking of awareness, the first step is really understanding that awareness in our lives. And then the entire Experience Miracles podcast, like if there is one drum that we feel like, we need to beat because the rest of the world isn't really beating it, and helping parents and other practitioners be aware of it, it's how much of a role stress during the prenatal period, the labor and delivery period, and that early childhood development period is. And awesomely, because the original tenets of conventional medicine are kind of based on genetics, right? And it's like, well, we're pre-programmed, stress and lifestyle and sugar and all this, they play some role. But, we kind of went through a schooling system that taught us genetics is the boss and lifestyle is a little bit. And we now know, okay, the science has proven the antithesis of that is true, especially in all the diseases and the challenges you talked about. Those are lifestyle diseases. Those aren't true genetic challenges. And so then we look at that, and I think a lot of us go, oh, yeah, well, for us as adults, we should manage, even if we start to become aware, we should manage our stress. We should spend more time outside, less time on screens, get to yoga class, mindfulness, meditation. But we're really missing how stressed out our children's nervous systems are, and that locks them into that fight or flight response right away. So what I love also about your action strategies is that for parents and for families, you're addressing that stress conversation, and you call it your smoothie, right? Where it's like, okay, now what is the beginning of the smoothie? Well, learning techniques that can help with stress management. And I love that parents would go down that road. And that's what we really want to encourage parents to do with this podcast, because our kids are always constantly going to do the things that we do, not what we say. So if we don't want them to get caught up in this toxic soup of stress for their entire life, and by the way, they're getting into it earlier. So that also means addressing it earlier. So awareness needs to go from action, right? Awareness and knowledge is not actually where power comes from. It's the application and the implementation of it. So when you see, let's put the whole family together. So let's say you have a patient come in and you see that the child is, maybe they are on the so autism is a full expression of sympathetic dominance, right? That child is neurologically locked in. Sensory challenges would be the same neurology with maybe less of a degree. So a kiddo somewhere on the sensory to autism spectrum, they're locked into sympathetic fight or flight stress. Mom and dad are locked into sympathetic fight or flight stress. And then because the condition itself is so stressful, you now see the family, these are all good things, but it adds stress. They're doing a million appointments, right? They've got all these therapies, they've got all these appointments. How do you begin to help them build action steps and strategies to dissipate that stress for them, but also for their child?
Well, I think the biggest thing to start with is really taking a thorough history and having a discussion and thinking about things in, I like to think about it as like a tree or even a smoothie. Like there are many different branches of things that can be very helpful or can be important for that family and that child. And so working through and trying to figure out what are the toxins, what are the chemicals, where are the places that they can have an improvement in their lifestyle. These are ways that you can certainly start. Obviously, if there's some sort of serious medical issue, you're going to deal with that first, and you're going to maybe
Yeah.
work with different practitioners. But I think that on the basic standpoint of the premise of like a fairly healthy child who's coming in for something that's pretty stable, then that's the way that I would think about it. And taking a step back and because you kind of alluded to the smoothie a little bit, so maybe I'll go through that and then I'll bring it back to this question. So
Yeah.
for me, when I wrote the book, one of the big things that I wanted to do was to write a book that was to de-stress parents, because I think parents are more stressed than ever, and we can talk about that a little bit more in the future. But the second big reason why I wanted to do it was most of the parenting books these days are written by therapists or moms or influencers and not doctors, right? And a lot of the books before were written by doctors. It was written by Dr. Spock. There's several other books along the way. And now usually when a doctor writes a book, it's more medical. So it's like, oh, well, you have a cough, here's the
Yeah.
medication you could take. Oh, you have a rash, here's the rashes you should look for. It's not really a parenting book with all the parenting questions that people have when they come into the doctor's office. But what's missing from those parenting books, especially from the therapist type book, which is great. I mean, the stuff they're informing you is really important, but it's missing the health part, right? They can't really talk about the health and wellness perspective because they're not a doctor and that's not their job, and they're not really in the nitty gritty with those kind of things. But our health is a serious issue and it's connected to all these things. You want to talk about tantrums? Well, you can't talk about tantrums without talking about health because those things are connected. And if you don't set the right foundation from day one, if you're not even aware of these things existing, then yes, you might have a kid that behaves pretty well, but then they're going to have a chronic disease. So we need to know both of these things. And that's why I start the introductory chapter really talking about stress and health. And that's where the Dr. Gator smoothie and the stuff that we're talking about comes in, because I kind of wanted to make fun a little bit of that smoothie concept. You watch the daytime TV show and, the air quotes, I'm making air quotes, but you can't see it if it's a podcast, but like they come in with their guru smoothie, right? And it's like, oh, well, if you take celery and carrots and apples and you magically mix it all together, then it's going to cure all your diseases. And you see it all the time, right? And that's like the thing for every book. And it's like, there's no such thing, right? Obviously, it's good to eat healthy and smoothies can be good for you or whatever, depending on what you put in there. But there's no magic cure. The reality of health and wellness is the foundations, right? And so the Dr. Gator smoothie, it's not a real smoothie per se. It's like the things that you put in there for health. So seeds is my acronym. So you start with a big scoop of the seeds, which is stress, environment and toxins, exercise, diet, and sleep. And then you can mix in any of the other things around your world that are really important to you. So like sunlight, getting out into nature, family and community, love, having access to care, good drinking water, all those kinds of things. I mean, you can list things off forever, but it's really just bringing you back to those foundations of things that are actually important. If you want to have a healthy kid, then you have to be mindful of those things, because if you are not, and you want to do the status quo, like you mentioned, it's fine. You can do the status quo, but then one or two of your kids are going to have chronic disease. That's just the way that it is. And that's not like shaming people or whatever. That's just the reality. Like that's what the stats are. So you can do everything the normal way. And if you're fine with that, that's cool. But your kids are probably going to have a chronic disease. And if you don't want that, then you have to do something different. And that doesn't mean you shouldn't go to the pediatrician or have a doctor. It just means that you need to be open to some of the other stuff, because you still need a doctor, because your kid might have something that you need a doctor for. But they're probably not going to sit
Yeah.
down and talk to you for an hour about nutrition. So maybe you need a nutritionist. Maybe you need a chiropractor who's knowledgeable in some of these areas. Maybe you need a naturopathic doctor. Whatever it is, this is where teamwork comes in, and something that I really push a lot, not so much in the book, but like just in when I talk about things, is like, why can't we work together? Why is there this like,
Yeah.
oh, chiropractors are woo woo when you talk to a doctor? Like, why are we not working together? Why don't we work with nutritionists? Why don't we work with naturopathic doctors? Like, what is the harm in teaming up for patients? Doctors don't need to be good at all this stuff. Like, that's not what we're trained in anyways, and probably not the best use of a doctor's time, really. It's just that you have to be humble and know that you're not
Yeah.
working on those things, and like there's no reason we can't work together. And a doctor's probably not going to spend an hour with every patient on nutrition. There's not enough doctors and not enough time, so it doesn't have to be. But if you acknowledge that that's a big deal, then maybe you have all your patients go to a nutritionist, something like that. I don't know, these things are possible if we just set up the system that way.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Here's what's really, really exciting. A couple layers to this that I'm put together with this. It's so dead on, spot on with where things need to move. And I would excitedly share with the audience, they are moving in that direction. And here's what's really cool. Your family matters most, right? So when it comes, we're talking about this because it's the Experience Miracles podcast. And we got Dr. Joel Gator on here. And we are trying to, because we just have big missions. We want to reach as many people as possible. But when it comes down to the granular of your child, your children, your family, well, when you move in this direction, you're going to get the benefit from it. You're going to move away from chronic disease by moving towards the basics of the health. And I love that you do things in sequence. There's a specific order to healing, and it isn't the fancy stuff first. It's the basic stuff first. I want to come back to that. But when you move towards those natural core foundations of health with the SEEDS acronym, you are also excitedly moving away from chronic disease, whether your child and your family already has it and you're on a healing journey, or hopefully we found you ahead of that and you're going to do this journey proactively in that way. But one of the realities that comes with that is there is an absolute hierarchy to health. And I've always said, I'm in full agreement with you, Dr. Joel. I have a son who 6 weeks in the NICU, traumatic birth. So I had made my whole specialty, my whole study and advancement in my career was going in this birth trauma, vagus nerve, nervous system damage. Like I had spent 3 years studying it. And then God had a heck of a clarifying journey for me, because it would turn out that Oliver, in my third year of practice, would have this traumatic birth, go from one hospital to another in a helicopter, from one level 3 NICU to another for another surgery. And I saw the best of modern medicine. I don't even have words to describe the fact that there's surgeons and there's devices and there's medications that can do these things for a baby is truly mind-blowing. And those words don't do it enough. But then had I expected and only thought that same life-saving emergency specialty system could rebuild his brain and rebuild his immune system and rebuild his digestive system that all went through that storm, that would have been, and here's the words I really want parents to hear, I strongly feel, and parents are always surprised that I think this way, but until you've lived it, you don't always know it. I think it would be wildly unfair of my wife and I to have expected and asked those questions of healing and repair and natural health of the experts in putting fires out. And so right now we have the majority of pediatricians who are trained in, like Dr. Joel started up by sharing and obviously knows about, because that is his training and his education. They're trained and ready for the worst, and they're the best at handling the worst. But that expertise over there is so far away from the core tenets of nutrition, nervous system health, stress management, movement, exercise. And so I think it's really, we just have a broken system. I don't think we have bad people with bad intentions. I think we have a really upside down, just really quite moronic and outdated system. Okay.
Right.
Like if I'm telling how I see it, we're expecting, it's just, our expectations don't match with the reality of how that system is. And so yeah, that is something. If we can, and how do you fix the system, moms and dads? Well, you don't have to, go in and change everything. You just change it for your family, right? And that's what's exciting when we open these windows and open these doors for families, right, Dr. Joel? It's like, okay, well, are we here today to change the world and completely, fix the system overnight? No, you don't need to as a parent. You just need to reorder and reprioritize the system for your family. And that's actually starting to spread too. We can add that up, beyond one kid in one family, and it needs to happen. But start with your family and take it from there. So I know I kind of sparked something there, Dr. Joel. So run with that a little bit.
Yeah. So first, I want to speak to your point of, first of all, pediatricians are not bad people, right? Come on. Like, pediatricians are there to help kids get well, right? So I never speak bad of pediatricians because doctors in general are not bad people. It's not that. It's just like you said, it is the system. We learned a certain thing and we're in a certain system, and you only have 2 minutes or 3 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever it is that you have with patients. And so you can't spend an hour talking about diet or nutrition. You're looking for the worst thing. You're making sure your kid doesn't have that thing, and then you're seeing the next kid. Like, that's the system, and that's where it is. So it's not about blaming doctors or whatever. It's that we're here now and we need a big shift. And it's not an easy thing to do because it's like, well, why don't the doctors do it? Well, they're stressed and overworked and don't have time and don't have necessarily an interest or aren't even necessarily aware. So it's going to take a big shift, and it is moving a little bit, but that's a big thing. So what I always talk about, and this is why, again, I write a book, I write a parenting book, talk about to parents, because you cannot change the whole system at home. You want to get involved in politics or whatever, go for it. That's great. And people need to do that. And eventually that will make a big difference. But you have to focus on yourself and your family. And if you do that, then it's going to get you a very far way, because I see it with my own patients. I see it with all the practitioners that I work with and talk to, that you can have a chronic disease and you can lose that diagnosis. You can be on a lot of medication and get off that medication or decrease the medication. Every part of this is good. There's no downside to it. Whatever it is for you, whether it's preventing or just thinking about it for yourself, for your kids, these things matter. And little steps make a huge difference. And you don't have to do everything. It's not overwhelming, but it does matter. It matters a lot that you focus on these things. It matters a lot that you're conscious about the decisions that you make. And a really good example, it's really simple, but it's like mind-blowing, is there was a Harvard study that was looking at soup. It was from a few years ago, and it was canned soup versus homemade soup, and they gave it to the participants for 5 days. And inside of the soup cans, they have BPA lining, right, like plastic lining on those cans of soup. So they measured the levels of BPA after those 5 days, and the people that had homemade soup had like 1,000% lower levels of BPA in their blood just for 5 days, right? Just 5 days. So think about that and any other thing that you're doing over a long period of time of the decisions that we're making. It adds up and makes a huge difference. You eat one piece of cake, it's not going to make that much difference for basically anybody. But if you eat it every single day for 10 years, then it matters. And if you are mindful of everything that you're purchasing, yes, maybe you weren't aware before, but if you just read the label on everything that you buy from now on, and you don't buy things you don't even know what they are, then that adds up over 10 or 20 years. It makes a huge difference. You teach your kids a different way of thinking. It's not about being woo-woo or out there. It's just being mindful that, like, hey, I shouldn't put this crappy chemical in my body. Oh, I shouldn't spray this thing in my home because it might affect their endocrine system. Oh, there's this product that's banned everywhere but America. I probably shouldn't be eating that. It's like, these are basic things. It's not woo-woo. It's like, just be mindful. You don't have to have a PhD in chemistry to know. You look at a label, you don't know what the word it is, it's probably not good for you. Like, if it's an avocado, okay, it's something that's a word I know. Versus methyl tetra, whatever, blah, blah, blah. It's probably not good for you. So just avoid those things. And you do that, and that's like 99% of the way that you go. And most people can detoxify some chemicals, and you can live a healthy life. But everybody's falling off the cliff now. We're too many chemicals, not enough good nutrition, not enough vitamins, not enough sunlight. All these things that are so basic that you get a chronic disease.
Yeah, I love this because I knew this was going to be I know I've already said this 3 times over. Our audience knows that. And actually, it's really the strategy of my teaching style, if you will. The core tenets, the stuff that I know is the most important, I will always intentionally be redundant. I will be a broken record and say the same thing 3 times to 13 times to 30 times over, because we all can only, retain so much information from an hour podcast or a book. And so, like, what is it in this conversation that is most important? And so, what I love about your content, I've said it a couple of times now, is just that you continue to hammer on the basic core principles. And I want to kind of go deep there a little bit with the audience. Now, for a lot of folks that my specialty is really tough stuff. So our clinic is autism and epilepsy and chronic diseases and challenges and birth trauma and vagus nerve dysfunction. And so what happens when your kiddo is really struggling with and they're really struggling, I want to emphasize that, with a lot of tough stuff, is a lot of practitioners, actually the majority of practitioners, because they do see those deeply woven challenges into your child's physiology, neurology, brain, gut, inflammatory system, endocrine system, you name it. We have also actually seen, Dr. Joel, we've seen, I would say, natural, integrative, functional side of healthcare. I think we've gotten so advanced, we are now outdated and missing the forest through the trees. And here's where I'm going with this, moms and dads. And if you really have a kiddo who struggles a lot, you really need to hear this part of the message. The basics are still, by far, it's not even close, the most important thing you must master first before we worry about ashwagandha and brain tapping and cold plunging and which probiotic strain in it. I should it be 50 million or should it be 51 million? The truth is, natural health and integrative health is catching fire. But I see it starting to repeat some of the mistakes of modern medicine, where we're trying to, I would just say in my work, so many practitioners, and even of my same, degree, they're trying to heal the brain while the body is still a mess, and the brain works for the body. And so if you don't get sleep, if you don't get gut function, if you don't get a hold of these basic core tenets, you're not going to get to the anxiety in the brain. You're not going to get to the autism in the brain. That's not how health works. The development of health, like if we think of what a baby is supposed to do, a healthy, brand new, beautiful, cute, chubby baby is supposed to eat, sleep, poop, smile, and then start moving, right? Go through gross motor function. And so what we do in our clinics is we have 19-year-olds coming in with, medication resistant, irretractable, epilepsy and anxiety and depression. And my first questions are, and my first goal of week 1 of their care is, let's get you sleeping. Let's get you pooping. Let's get you outside. And the parents sometimes are like, who is this chump? We came here for advanced neurology, and all he wants to talk about is the basics. And so I'm on one now, but I just really respect that about you, Dr. Joel, that you know that healing happens in a certain sequence and in a certain order. And there's not a single condition, not a single family, not a single patient where you can skip the basics and the core tenets of good health and get good outcomes, whether you're doing that from a wellness and a proactive standpoint, or whether you're doing that from, because if we go through the stats you shared earlier, we understand that perhaps the majority of our audience is listening to us because they're trying to heal chronic disease of their kids. And so I just want to let you know, don't get caught up in the minutia until your child's nervous system can process and regulate and do the basics as well. So within that, what I love about the book is it actually has the word pace in it. I feel like what we're talking about here this whole time is something that is just, you've just really developed a good understanding of, you're not trying to build Rome in a day, right? With your patients and changing their lifestyle and doing all that. So how have you shifted things? So I'm going to kind of shift gears a little bit with the conversation, a little bit more into almost like, gosh, I'd almost call it logistical questions, buddy. Like, have you changed the kind of flow and the processes of your practice where you can have a little more time, or is it, or you have really worked hard to build collaborations with other experts? So if you take a patient in and man, they need nutrition, they need lifestyle counseling, they need chiropractic, is it something that you do a lot of yourself, or have you more strategically built partnerships and collaborations with other practitioners?
I think it's both. I mean, for sure, it's both. Definitely have a lot of collaborations, and I'm for sure much more open than most doctors to, sending to practitioners such as yourself, because I've seen the benefits, and I think my patients are self-selecting, so they're coming to an integrated practice, so they're more open to it if they're not already
Totally.
going already. And certainly we have more time than the average doctor. Being a private practice, I just by nature have that. I don't have like 6 hours that kind of practice, but I spend more than usually 3 minutes with patients. So I think it's both of those things. But I think on a grander scale, especially when we're talking about social media and kind of messaging, it's all about the basics, like you said, because the reality is that if something is very complicated and you're getting into the nitty gritty, you can't talk about it on social media anyways. It's so patient dependent that they need a practitioner like you who can dive in to the nitty gritty and kind of work with somebody over time, to get to that last few percentage. But exactly like you said, and exactly like I believe, the vast majority starts with the basics that everybody can do anyways, the things that we actually can do something about. I try to speak to the things that people can actually do, right? Like you can say like, oh, well, we should change our water. We should have better air quality. We should change the rules. But it's like, you're not going to do that, right? Or it's not going to change today. So the question is, what can you actually do for your own family? And so that's where thinking about the basics are so important, because you can talk to any practitioner who does integrative medicine. They will all say the number one things are the foundations. They will all talk about diet first, and you will get 75, 90% of the way to a healing place if you change up your lifestyle over the next 5 or 10 years. And then the last few percentages, yes, you maybe you have low vitamin D. So yeah, you should probably get more sunshine, but you can take some supplementation potentially to boost that level in the short term. Oh, you have low, this or that. Okay, that's where supplements can come in, but it's not a thing for your life. That's not the thing you're supposed to have for the rest of your life. You're supposed to eat the food, and your body's supposed to produce the things. You can be there to boost it up and support it, and that's where a good practitioner who's doing the appropriate testing say, well, you should work on this, this, and this. That can get you, jump started or moving in the right direction. But none of it matters if you don't exercise. None of it matters if you don't eat good food, because you're literally built of what you eat, right? We forget this stuff, but like, we're built of what we eat. So if we don't give our body the nutrients that it needs, then your immune system's not going to function properly, optimally. Your body's not going to work right, and you're going to get sick. Like, how can your immune system work properly if you don't give it the basic building blocks that it needs? You go to a store and you still buy the food that you theoretically should be buying. It's like, it's mass produced. It's been shipped across the country. Like, you pick, if you have a garden at home and you pick something, how many days does it last? Like 2, 3, maybe 4 days. But where is the food coming from? And when was it picked when you're getting from a grocery store? Like, that's the best case scenario. It's been shipped across the country, it was picked early, it was sprayed in whatever, so I mean, there we can get in, we don't have time to get into all the things that we can do, but like, these are the basic things that we're faced with these days. So if you're not even doing that, if you're not even eating real food, then how do you expect your child's body to work? Like, why would it not have a chronic disease? Of course it does. That's what's happening. Like, we're eating crappy food. We're spraying everything in chemicals. We're covered in chemicals, and we're like shocked that kids have a chronic disease. And obviously, it's why it's happening. We just need to figure out how to move the other way. But you can do it. Everybody can do it. They can be mindful, and we're not meant to have chronic disease, and we don't have to. If you are mindful, which a lot of people are waking up to this fact, then you give your kids a better chance. Nothing is perfect, right? And I'll just say this again. It's like, you could be the healthiest family in the world, and you can get really unlucky, and whatever genetics, your kid gets cancer, your kid gets, whatever disease, and an unfortunate thing, it's possible. You could be the most unhealthy person, smoking and drinking every day and live till 110. These things happen. But our job as parents is not to look at those extremes. It's to make them as resilient as possible, to give them the best chance at health, to give their bodies the best chance to fight disease and to not have a chronic disease. And that's what we're trying to do. And you can do that. People can do that. They've been doing it forever, and people are doing it now, and they see the changes, and you see it. You work on it every day.
Yep. Perfectly stated. And as we kind of round third base and bring this one into action for you guys, I love that. The joke in my head here, buddy, is that I always think, okay, because growing your own food and being able to grow so many foods, so many healthy foods, get access to them yourself and be able to eat them so fresh, that has to be the only reason that you and my friends like Dr. Stanton and Dr. Billy D stay in California, because you have access to that, that you have the advantage on that end of things. But everyone out there, there's so many different ways to move forward towards better health. And I want to speak to one thing, just kind of as we get towards closing here. I know a lot of families listening in today's world. Now, this is awesomely, vividly different than 10 to 15 years, because there is so much more awareness. And so many of you amazing rock star moms and dads have taken so much more action. And you're hearing our message here today, which is the exact message I wanted to have, is really hammer on the basics. And you're saying, dang it, we've gone gluten-free, we've gone casein-free. There isn't a chemical in my kids, in our household. My kids aren't exposed to them. We have gone to OT, we have gone to PT, we have gone to ABA. We are taking $8,000 a month in supplements and essential oils and herbs. Like the mom that I know really tunes into our content, the mom of today has taken a lot of action. And there's this I'm going to call it neurological line in the sand that I want to really help parents be aware of. And I'm not going to break down all the neurology of it today. If what I'm about to say really resonates with your family, where you feel like you've tried and done all the basics and maybe even beyond that of natural health and healing, and you don't have the results you want for your kiddo yet, I need you to, I guess, what would it be on a podcast? Scroll up or scroll back and listen to my solo episode on the perfect storm, where we talk about the real implications of stress during pregnancy, forceps, vacuum, C-section, just what happens at labor and delivery if your child's central and autonomic nervous system is shifted entirely into sympathetic dominance. It's called dysautonomia is the nerd word on that. Then they are often so neurophysiologically shut down that they won't even respond to the basics. They won't eat the protein and the fat. They can only really handle the carbs and the sugar and the refined. There is kind of this conundrum that a lot of families go through, but that's also what Dr. Joel was talking about. Those are the percentage of cases then where you need a specialty practitioner like a neurologically focused chiropractor. And that becomes, I don't usually call that even step one. That becomes step zero, the real true, almost below the foundation, where you get your child adjusted in those ways. It resets and releases tension from the sympathetic nervous system, and it gets their foundational nervous system function back online so that then they are more responsive to building a better lifestyle and building resilience. So I just didn't want to finish our episode before we find, that specialty to it. Joel?
Yeah, and I just want to say that, like, you said that so brilliantly, but the only thing that I would change from what you said is I don't think it's step zero. Like, you mentioned the parents already did all this stuff, right? Like that's literally the progression that I think, right? It's
True.
Like, that's where you come in. It's really the backwards way that medicine is, where all of those things are the things you should think about first. I mean, you can certainly go to a practitioner, but it's like, if you're like, I changed up the diet. I heard Dr. Joel talk on your podcast, and that weird dude, whatever, fine. And I made all these changes, and yet like nothing's changed. Or, I've done this and I've seen like a little difference, but it's not really mattering. Okay, but that's what I want people to do, right? Because that's the first step, because for a lot of people, That's going to make a big difference. Then, if it's not getting you to where you want to be, or simultaneously with that, you work with a practitioner like you, because number one, there is genetics at play, that you can have the best diet in the world and you still might have a genetic condition, or, you might have autism or whatever. And there's so many different factors and so many different probably subtypes and things like that. So maybe you have a genetics where it doesn't matter what you do lifestyle wise, there's still going to be issues, and that maybe there's other things that you could do, or you do them in tandem, or maybe you didn't think about something. You're like, I did everything. But you actually didn't, right? Like maybe you're not really actually not that stressed. Or maybe you live in a home and there's lead or something and you just didn't think about it. Well, that's where a practitioner that can run through these things can make you think about other things. And maybe you just haven't found the issue yet. Or maybe it's just genetics. I mean, that may be the case, and that's certainly the case sometimes. Like they're with cystic fibrosis, they're gonna have cystic fibrosis. You can't change that. But you can make their life better.
Yep. That is to the T. And that is the journey. That's the sequence that a lot of parents find themselves on. And when I first got into practice, they had already exhausted, it felt like we should answer the phone, welcome to the last resort. Parents had already exhausted all the different medical specialists and all the different medications, but they didn't yet know the first thing about natural health and the basics and healing. So, 15 years ago, you got to work on not only the neurological component, but on the lifestyle component. Now in today's practice, what is exciting, and this is the part for parents to hear as well, if you've already done all those things, and yes, maybe you haven't totally turned the tide yet, you got to know how vital and how foundational and how effective the work that you've done is. So if there's that next key with that next practitioner that you then find in sequence, do you know how much easier that door is going to open with that key, because you've cleaned up the diet, because you've cleaned up your lifestyle, because you've gotten chemicals out of the home? it's one of my favorite conversations with parents to have, because that is our clinic for sure, Dr. Joel. It's kind of like that. It's like the new modern last resort clinic. Not only have I exhausted all of medicine, but I've exhausted all these other things. Well, that's through process of elimination. That does, usually take you back to the nervous system, right? That's that final missing link, like you were talking about. I get so excited to go into that consultation and teach parents that, because they have done so much of the legwork for us from a healing endeavor, right? That kiddo who's living that healthy lifestyle has that good, clean diet. They get outside, they turn screens off, they go outside, they prioritize movement and sleep and all these things. That kid heals like a boss compared to the kid who is still, hammering Cheez-Its and Nickelodeon and living a chemically laced, not that the kiddo would make those decisions on their own, but there is a huge dichotomy in healing potential. And parents, you are the ones that are very much empowered and kicking butt and doing amazing. So I need everybody to hear this from Dr. Joel and I, how far, especially those of you that have gone so far down that road. Sit back with this podcast episode and be excited and be happy, because you have done so much healing already for your child. And if you're still looking for that final key, you need to very much know that you have absolutely primed the pump. And when you find that next thing, it's going to work infinitely better because of the awesome work you've done. Dr. Joel, we can't thank you enough for not only being here, taking an hour of your day. I know you're cranking content, you're seeing patients, you're living life, and you took time to be with us. I am wildly appreciative of that. And then we are really, really wildly appreciative of the content on Instagram, but especially the resources of the book. I just really love the time. I'm a word guy. I really pay a lot of attention to, even though I use a zillion words and kind of, very Iowa farmer analogies when I'm talking out loud. When I slow down and write things, I'm very meticulous with the words that I choose to title things. So I just absolutely love parenting at your child's pace. Just the concepts that the title of the book teaches, I know can really change lives. So what is the best place for them to get more of you, and the best place to get the book and move in this direction with their family?
First of all, thank you for everything that you do, and thank you for your mission and all that you're sharing with families. It's super important. And you can go to Instagram if you want. That's a good launch pad for all my stuff. Dr. Joel Gator. The book is, like you said, Parenting at Your Child's Pace. The book website is parentingatyourchildspace.com. Or you can go to Amazon or any of the places that you get books. I will finish with the joke that I always say. It's like, all the people, they're like, oh, you can go to all the places where you can get a book. Everybody always asks, but we actually know, where you can get books. But maybe I'll just not put it on Amazon or something, and just just come over to my house. You can just pick them up in my front lawn. That's the only place you can get them. I'm sorry. But yeah, anywhere that books are sold, no different.
And I love, we'll leave it with these words, because these are your words from the book and from the content you put out there. And it says, your number one mission is to inspire parenting confidence. You are ready. You can do it. That is our favorite moment in time. You can see it. There's just this kind of feeling when a parent finds their confidence, right? And some of them that happens quickly, and some of them that happens over years. And that is the spark that changes that child's life. When the parent becomes empowered, finds their confidence, now you can move in that direction towards health and healing. And when you move in that direction, your kiddo's going to heal, you're going to heal, your family's going to just learn this and pass it down for generations. So that's truly where the impact and the transformation is going to come. Dr. Joel, thank you very much for jamming with us. And keep rocking those whiteboards, man. Keep putting that message out there. We'll continue to be liking it and sharing it and loving it and sending it all along. We'll see you next time. Thanks, buddy.